Why are cities important? And why should we care about getting city regions right? Watch the Urban Queue to know what it takes to shape a city that works for all. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Urban Queue. Today we have with us Anu Acharya. Anu Acharya is an innovator, entrepreneur, a thought leader, and pioneer in the field of personalized genomics in India. She's the founder and CEO of two companies at the forefront of personalized genomics, Mapmygenome and Ocimum Bio, which combine biotechnology and data to help people make more informed choices about their health and improve healthcare in India. Anu has been awarded extensively. She was honored as the Young Global Leader by the World Economic Forum in 2011 and has since been recognized numerous times for her impact as an entrepreneur, including by the Economic Times and Forbes. More recently, she was conferred the Women Transforming India Award organized by the Niti Aayog. Beyond her love for science, Anu also enjoys poetry, having penned a book of poems called Atomic Pohe, Random Rhymes at Odd Times on Science, Non-Science, and Nonsense. Welcome, Anu, and thank you for joining us on our podcast, The Urban View.
Thank you so much, Jaya. It's nice to see you as well.
So, Anu, to start with, there's a question I ask pretty much everyone about cities, right? That's what we're talking about today. So, as an entrepreneur and innovator who's lived and worked in many cities across the globe, the city you inhabit influences your lifestyle and well being, and you know that. So, with that in mind, what do you think makes a livable city, and which is your favorite city?
So, my favorite city, I guess I still haven't found what I'm looking for, you know. But as you know, I think there are certain things that I like about every city that I have been in. But there are elements of, my childhood, for instance, we grew up in Kharagpur. I think you want some of that to be incorporated in some of the cities because it used to be a very clean air place for people to move around and be able to be active and all of that. And I think that all makes a huge difference when it comes to what you can do within a city. I now live in Hyderabad, and while it's a fantastic city, I think if I had to make tweaks, I would have to make a lot of tweaks in terms of making it as easy to be able to walk around and do enough physical activity without having to go to a gym. Right. So I think that's some of the things that are there. I'm also spending time in Vancouver, which has fantastic ability to be able to walk around, but then there is some limitation in terms of public, infrastructure as the city is growing. So I think there are some good things and bad things about every city, and I would like to see some cities evolve into a little bit more health preserving cities rather than health deteriorating cities.
Fantastic. And I'll come to that thing about the health preserving cities a little bit later. But yeah, I kind of see your point about how no city, no one city has it all. Now, given that our cities are growing dense, and you mentioned Vancouver as well, and we're feeling the effects of environmental stressors throughout the year, how do you think our urban environments are sort of influencing our genetic health over time?
I think a lot like when you look at health as an overall overarching, like just understanding, there is genetics, there's environment, and there's lifestyle. And often I think, now for instance, they are saying that the air in Delhi is equivalent to smoking 44 cigarettes a day, right? So obviously that's going to have an effect on your health. But Delhi is not the only city. I think there are many more cities where what is going on with your environment is one huge, air pollution is one big thing, but it's also about what is there in your pesticides in your food. There are many other pieces that are there that and today we are living in a global economy, it's difficult for you to maybe not get some of that effects that happening in some part of the world, right? So there are many issues that may come up, but there is certainly, I think, a possibility of being able to create environments or spaces that can minimize the effects of any of these challenges that are there.
That's interesting. So, also, Anu, many environmental conservation efforts rely on sort of landscape genomics, which traces the relationship between the environment and genetic adaptation. And there's growing consciousness for the need to be better prepared against urban climate risks at the same time. So, do you think there are genomic insights that could help cities predict these risks to public health, posed by climate change?
Certainly, I think, if you remember during the time of COVID, we used data that came from public sources, drainages and others, to be able to understand if there are certain pathogens in those city areas and all that. And it was a great way of being able to predict some of what was going on in the environment at that time. Similarly, I think when you look at what is happening with evolution, and you can trace this evolution over a period of time. You can't see it maybe in the next 3 4 years, but you do find that when you trace back a lot of the historical events that have happened, that has shaped or preserved certain traits or genetic traits for specific geographic locations, right? So while we all might have started from Africa or other places, I think we've all evolved so that you are sort of preserving, some of those traits that allow you to survive. The other traits die out, right? So if you are for instance, you find that because of the slave trade, there are certain parts that people had preserved in terms of how do you survive stress and things like that. So there are some genetic information that will survive over many years, and you'll find that over a larger, see a period of more than 50, 100 years, you'll be able to find that. And today you can trace your ancestry, you are able to find where you came from, but you also see what differences have come about for that individual. So that's one piece of the puzzle, right? That you do find that environmental stressors can cause certain types of, people with certain genetic variants to die out because they won't be able to survive in those conditions. The second piece is the whole epigenetic piece, right? So today, for instance, I think we see several research studies that tell you that if you are doing meditation, you see an effect on just your epigenetics. You see an effect in terms of how you're aging and so on. Similarly, I think you find research that shows you that environmental pollution and others are causing a change in terms of how you're aging, right? So your epigenetics makes a big change. Uh, that is another piece. The third piece, which I think is also fascinating, is that if you look at what is going on with the microbiome of different geographies, right, you will find that while it'll depend on what you've eaten and all of that, in general, you'll find that for geographies in certain places, you will find some microbes in individuals for those areas. And as we all know, your microbiome is actually influencing your health as well. So there are many pieces of this whole puzzle, and all of them ultimately point out to the fact that if we do play with climate change, and we already are. If we change the environment that we are living in, and if we are actually, tracing what has happened over the last few years, you're finding that whether it's your genetics, your epigenetics, or your microbiome, all have some role when it comes to what is going on with our environment and what is going on with our cities and specifically the places we live in, what kind of food is available to us and so on. So I think everything is connected. And of course, there is the whole added piece about your mind and body, your stress and your pathophysiology. So I think lots of things are connected, and people forget that, how much time they spend in doing all of that can actually, you might be doing a lot of work in your gym, but you might undo a lot of that just by being in a space that is probably has pollutants, that is probably has bad quality of things that you're eating without you knowing it and so on. So there's a lot of role that I think good planning or a good design of cities would play in terms of what we can expect, if we can, in the future.
This is fascinating, Anu. This is a nurture and nature conversation, right? And how both of them kind of come together. So, just given that background, do you think that currently there are certain populations that have genetically become more vulnerable or more disposed to sort of health risks posed by climate events like extreme heat or air pollution?
Certainly, I think so if you find populations that already have some predisposition towards, uh, you know, higher risk of diseases based on that, they will be the ones most affected, right? So if you look at, for instance, I think somebody who has a population a cohort that has a high risk of asthma, for instance, if you put them in an environment that is aggravating that situation, at some point of time, that will be the one, that will be the kind of cohorts that will be most stressed, right? You might not see it immediately, but you will see that over a period of time. And that's what we have seen. I mean, that's why I was saying that when you look at evolution, you look at our historical, uh, you know, uh, you look at your ancestry and all of that, and how we have migrated, and how that has affected our traits, and how that has changed the way our health predisposition is. I think that shows that there will be, I mean, quite a few people who will be affected by that in the long run, and even in the short run. I think you can start seeing it in a specific population, in a specific individual as well.
All right. So then let's come to sort of solutions. Now, the solution side of it with the information that we have, right? So clearly there are some things that we can't do anything about, right? And there are some things which are, tractable. There are certain challenges and barriers that we can overcome. And so in terms of, developing solutions, what kind of genomic insights do you think might be useful for urban residents to cope with heat or other sort of climate related stress? What would what would that tell them about their ability to do this?
So I think once they get genetic insights, right, if they see that they are predisposed to something, I mean, while I can't change that they might find a job in a particular location or not, I think if they do value their health, I think they should consider, one is, if they possibly can change, that is one, that just change your environment that you live in. But the other is that there are now enough devices also that can help you change some of that. Like you can put air purifiers and others, but you can't really then limit that you are going to be staying indoors, or you're just going to be in a place that allows you to change. But I've seen reports of cities that have been able to reduce some of that, and some specific locations where they've been able to reduce their air pollution even in living in a larger city. And you probably know that better than me. But if we are able to do that, I think, and if individuals are able to do that, if cities are able to provide that, I think it becomes great, right? I mean, of course, there's simpler solutions like growing trees and others that can deal with some of those uh, pollution. But there are, I think, things that individuals can do. There are things that probably people who plan cities can do better in terms of creating. I think this easiest thing in India would be if, one, we allow people to be able to walk on sidewalks, grow more trees, and also be able to find ways that people can actually interact with each other in a more easier way than actually making an artificial way of being able to find places where people can actually talk to each other and meet.
That's interesting. So you talked about what can be done at the individual level and what can sort of cities do and what can authorities do, right? So coming to that point, what do you think is the most urgent health need that city officials can help address, residents cope with, or prepare for the climate hazards that are coming at us with the fastest speed right now?
So I think, for instance, in Hyderabad, and I don't know about too many other cities, but in Hyderabad, for instance, they did do a big program to make it all green, right? So they planted, lots and lots of trees. So you do see that green cover in the city. But at the same time, like I mentioned, I think if you don't live in like a villa complex or place, it's literally hard to be able to walk around in the city, right? And I think that's the biggest thing, right? So if people need to just be able to walk to their next door place to pick up something, that gives them the exercise. It reduces some of the pollution that you might create by using a car or otherwise. And I think just those little things can be done to be able to make that. And I know that they have tried doing it in some parts of the city, but it's just not enough, right? I mean, it's because a lot of cities are already overflowing, or there are more people than that infrastructure can handle. So I think when we plan newer cities or newer areas, I think just creating spaces to walk, and having enough of that, I think would solve many things. But of course, if the city is going to be badly polluted, even creating sidewalks is going to be completely useless, because you don't want to be going out with a big N95 mask when you're going out every time you are in the outdoors.
Right. No, so and I'm wondering and I'm thinking that some of these things that we're talking about, I think largely and a large part of the population and not just city officials, but a large part of the population are just unaware of, right? I mean, people just don't know about these connections and how some of this science can be used to kind of also inform, the way that we're designing, building cities, the way that we're living, and so on and so forth. So I know this is all fascinating. And, coming to sort of our last question, it's kind of a short thought exercise, if you will. And if you were to imagine yourself as an urban planner or, someone who can design cities, thinking about cities, green spaces, transportation systems, and other infrastructure, and with that lens, what
Mhm.
might be three examples where genomics could help you design spaces that promote well-being on the one hand, and also enhance our resilience to climate shocks?
So I think the easier ways to measure one could be just doing soil metagenomics, right? You want to understand what's going on in your soil. And can we, in some form, be able to find the right kind of plants that and other soils that can give us the bacteria that we need for better growth of some of these plants, right? That could be one. The second thing that could be done, and I think it's being done with some of these companies like Toto and others, that you're using your some of your urine and stool to be able to give you a test of what is going on, right? And if that can help, make quicker decisions, that would be another thing that from give you some insights into what is going on today. And the other thing could be that if you do like a analysis of just what is going on in your body, a score that we are doing. For instance, when we do a genome patri and then we do a blood marker thing, we use AI to be able to give you a score. I think that real time insights into the information that you get with the genetic information and your environment, the combination of the two plus the blood report is what is going to be ultimately giving you real time insights into saying what you should be doing, right? So, for instance, um, when my air purifier tells me that this is what is going on, you are aware, right? I think when you know, then you are aware. It's very hard for some of us to know what is going on without measuring something. So I think people should do individual genetic testing to understand if they're predisposed, and if they're predisposed, what should you do to counter that? Because you can't change your genes, but you can change your environment and you can change your lifestyle. So I think that's number one. The second is from an overall point of view. I know soil metagenomics can be done, but I'm sure that there are ways to be also be measuring some of the air quality, and that might be another thing to understand if there is something that is happening that we can change. And the third could be that we are seeing like a lot of climate change and all of some of those microplastics and others that are slowly coming into our systems. Understanding of what is going on in our microbiome and the epigenetics maybe will give us some insights into what can be done. Of course, that really requires anything, whether it's genetics, whether it's climate change, whether it is what's going on with the world. I think ultimately we have to do the things that are right. And I think, but the first part is, can you measure? And when you can measure, then you're more likely to do something that is going to improve your health and then the health of the entire city as well.
No, and that's an excellent point. And but I have to ask you this. I know I said last question, but then again, super last question. This one is that not all people. I think not everyone is aware or able to do their genetic testing. So, if I were to say that what is the one thing that you should watch out for or be aware of on how sort of your environment influences sort of your well-being and your health on the one hand, and the one thing that you sort of wish city officials knew or can act on in Indian cities, if I said blanket thing, what is that one thing that city officials can do and that Indian cities can do to basically improve the quality of life for all of us, to kind of lessen our exposures and do all of that? What would that be?
So I think from the city's perspective, it is certainly, I would say pollution is going to be the most obvious one, but there's also water, right? I think there are bacteria, there are other microbes in water and other places as well. So when you think about cities, they are much more a denser population than, let's say, a smaller town or village where your contact with people is less. Now, a lot of times your microbiome is also influenced by the people that you're interacting with, right? So it's not just you. You might do all the right things. So, for instance, you are one of those people who is absolutely careful about doing everything right. Now you will come in contact with people, and there's chance that some of those microbes come to you as well, right? Now that's when you think about that, you have to realize that it's not just what you do; it's also what other people are doing. And so ultimately, we are all in what they call as a one health this thing, right? Because what you do can influence my health and others, and especially so in a city because it's so you're so close to each other, right? So you are sharing environments, you're sharing microbes, you're sharing a lot of things that maybe you didn't think that you were sharing, right? So one is that how do we do that? So I think if city officials one can reduce some of the problems that we see today in the air and in water, that's the one thing that is commonly going around. The second thing that I guess we can watch out for is some of the food that we are eating, right? While it's not possible for every individual to grow their own food and eat their own food, I think if we can do enough testing of different places where these uh, plants are grown, maybe it'll give us an insight into what we are actually ingesting into this whole the ecosystem. Because if your soil is has the wrong kind of micro like the if you can understand what's going on over there, I think that's also what we will be eating. So I think multiple things that they can do. And the other things that I did mention, which I wish would be there, would be just places for people to become healthy just by being rather than by trying.
No, this is fantastic, and I this is very interesting insight, right? So no matter how hard you try, no person is an island, and this is the true spirit of Vasudeva Kutumbakam, and it's there's the upside to that and the downside to that. So very interesting. But I love that you said that our air and our water, things that we kind of take into our system on a daily basis, and we need to survive are the things that we need to be paying most attention to at the individual level, at the collective level as well. So, thank you very much for that, Anu. This has been an absolutely insightful conversation, and you are doing very important work in this space, which will be very useful going forward in how we plan, design cities. Which will affect sort of individual well-being, but also how communities decide to live together and promote their wellness. So thank you so much. Wish you all the very best in all your endeavors and good luck with everything that you're doing. I love this conversation and thank you again for talking to us.
Thank you, Jaya. I think if we are thinking about planning cities well, I think that is the best part forward, right? So I think that is when we can start expecting that we will see this in the future a lot more better planned cities than we have. I think some were just imposed on us, but I think if we plan on where to build better, I think I would be the happiest person to when that happens. Thank you for the work you guys, all of you will do as well. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anu.